Solly Mapaila. Thanks so much for your time, Solly. Appreciate it. Before we get to the politics of this man, you have interacted with him. Tell us about his demeanor when he visited.
Well, it was not much interaction, just to greet him, but of course his aura was something else. I mean, same as that of President Mandela, and these two, as you know, were great friends, great revolutionaries. But Castro was the finest of all modern revolutionaries, a selfless human being who led exceedingly by example, and he inspired generations and generations of Cuban internationalists who gave their life for the freedom of other people in Latin America, in Africa, here for their contribution, for instance, to South Africa. Over 200 or so of them died in Angola, fighting for the liberation precisely of Angola and South Africa and Namibia. And they achieved that. And when he took back, when they were returning back to Cuba, only their remains were taken back. Not a single carat of diamond was extracted illegally or somehow by the Cuban internationalists. And he continues to export skills to the world, human internationalism. As you know, recently when Africa had Ebola, the so-called first world countries with best medical services were afraid to come and help the African people. The best volunteers came from Cuban doctors who raised their hands and said they want to go there. And in fact, not all were allowed to join the crew that came, but those who were allowed still recognize that as a special badge of human service. And this is his legacy. And I think that we as communists celebrate his life, and we pay tribute to this outstanding communist and revolutionary whose contribution to humanity is so far unsurpassed by any other revolutionary or human being that lives.
Now, the SACP actually established relations with Cubans from the 1970s. So this is a deep-rooted relationship that the SACP has with the Cubans itself. Tell us about how you think it actually inspired your own leaders.
Well, it was much earlier than that. Of course, in the 60s, when we established links, but in the 70s, it was tightly deepened because we're now training a lot of our cadres in Cuba, in military, in the field of technical skills as medical doctors as well. And all of these were done for us for free, including the special training for a special unit just towards the eve of freedom of eNCA were trained in Cuba by Fidel. So we have had long-term relationship. We have some of our cadres, for instance, that are buried in Cuba, who, when they arrived there, he gave them special recognition. He accredited both the SACP and ANC chief representatives with full ambassadorial colors, and they enjoyed all the freedom like all embassies that he enjoyed in Cuba. So he treated us literally with a sense of freedom, recognizing the fact that our struggle was a just struggle, and he contributed to that particular struggle by also sending his doctors to our camps. They stayed with us in the camps, they ate what we ate, we suffered with them under the mosquitoes and so forth. So his contribution and the contribution of the Cuban people as a whole to our struggle, it's so far unparalleled. And I think that he will be remembered for his great deeds to humanity as a whole. And of course, as you will have seen, the mob in Miami that is celebrating his demise. In fact, I want to correct one of the slides that was there. It's completely incorrect. Cuba's socialism did not break down the economy of Cuba. The Americans who did not agree with the nationalization policy of Cuba, of major American industries that were at the center of oppression of Cuban economy and Cuban people, when they nationalized that, in 1961, American government invaded Cuba, and Fidel led by example in what is called the Bay of Pigs invasion to repel that attack. They sent so-called Cuban mercenaries, those who were in the former army of Batista with American fighter planes and so forth. They repelled that. After repelling that, Cuba declared a socialist system. And with the declaration of the socialist system, the American government imposed an atrocious economic blockade that is still in place today. It is the economic blockade that actually throttled Cuba's economic development. But nonetheless, despite all of that, Cuba still managed to produce the most literate country people in the world, good doctors that they supply to all over the world. They're supplying us even here today. Those doctors go and serve our people in the most rural areas, in the most needy areas where even our own locally trained doctors do not want to go. So with that kind of achievement, despite what they say about their economy, it's only those mobs in America that came from that are in Florida, that came from Cuba, who were enjoying the exploitation of Cubans, and now exploitation of Cubans by other Cubans has been outlawed completely. So that's the point. There's no capitalism in Cuba in that form of full exploitation. So what is now thriving, of course, is the fact that America is loosening its throttle on the Cuban economy, and the Cuban system has also introduced new reforms, and those reforms are not about destroying socialism. They're actually about defending socialism. And this was said by President Raul Castro when he responded to Ms. Hillary Clinton, who was saying that this new changes is a sense that the socialist system is coming to an end. The socialist system is actually strengthening in Cuba, and it can now freely trade with the world. We hope that Mr. Trump will actually continue with the easing of these methods in the restriction in the blockade through the Helms-Burton Act. We hope that they can repeal that and they can establish full trade relations with Cuba. But they must remove the atrocious economic blockade.
But the reality is, and I know that you have good reasons as to why these people fled, but there are thousands of people who fled. And if you're saying that these thousands of people left the country for the US because they supported the oppressive economic policies of the US on Cuba, can't be entirely right. I mean, lots of the people out in the streets of in Florida say that he wasn't a great leader. So how do you counter that? Yes, he's done so much for countries in the African continent. He's been more involved in the fight against apartheid than many other foreign countries. But this is a man whose own people stood up against him and said, we don't like the way you rule.
No, in fact, it's a huge American propaganda, that one. The issue is that obviously the Batista dictatorship in Cuba had immersed itself within the security establishment supported by US imperialism, and it had, of course, thousands of people. Those are the thousands of people. By the way, majority of them, when they left, it was there through the acceptance of the Cuban government. Actually, they declared that those who do not want to subject themselves to a people's government, to a people's rule, the system of socialism, they are free to go. And that's how some of them left. And of course, we'll also know that some of the people that other organizations were involved, including the church in this case, when they were trying to assist them to flee, went to enslave those people in America. And I think that those stories are the stories that are not being told. The story of Cuba, as far as contribution to human development, is unparalleled today in the history of humanity and the world. And it doesn't matter what the Americans, the propaganda of machinery of America can say to try and prove that. Over these 51 years of the blockade, they've been unable to break the unity of the Cuban people. The Cuban Revolution is defended by the Cuban people. It's an inspiration to all of us in the world, to Latin American countries, and that is why Fidel is revered by the poor and the working class in the world. The children of the bourgeoisie, the rich who are in America, who left Cuba, who wanted to continue the oppression of Cuba. Why do you think, for instance, in 1961, when the people defended that freedom? It was because Cuba took the land that was owned by multinational companies and handed it over to the people, the peasants. It is the peasant that defended that country. It is the peasant that reveres this man. It is the former slaves, modern day slaves, that now revere this man as their leader, that now revere the current Cuban leadership as their leaders. So what the few who had all enjoyed the privileges are now in the U.S. They can celebrate. In fact, we know of the mafias, the mob, Orlando and them, who have been sponsored by the U.S. successive U.S. government to even kill Fidel, and they failed. So even the Cuban Five, for instance, they were sold out by the same mob in Miami. And they came here in South Africa. They went to other Latin American countries and so forth. They were received by thousands of people because of their heroism. And all this is credit to the struggles of this great leader, Fidel Castro.
Very quickly, Solly, tell me, what do you think our current leaders could learn from someone like Fidel Castro?
It's a huge monumental task for all of us as leaders. This man led by example. He did not demand of his cadres what he could not do. That is why when the invasion of America came in 1961, he led by example. He was in the front line. He was on a tank fighting the fighter planes. He endangered himself. We don't have such kind of leaders. And I think that the biggest bar that he has set is for us to lead by example as leaders, fighting corruption, ensuring that we have solidarity amongst the poor, and defending the rights of the oppressed all over the world. And even here, we can give more internationalism as South Africa in tribute to Comrade Fidel.
All right, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.